Paige Bazemore. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you, David?
Very well, thank you. Let's acknowledge that although we in the class of 1988 knew you as Paige Bazemore, you now are doing business under the name Paige Pualani Gabel. And
Yes.
Paige, tell us where you are right now.
Right now, I'm a little bit north of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Uh, I ended up here in 2005, but we are soon to be relocating to the wonderful state of Idaho. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's just a new development on our journey towards the back nine of our life, I guess you could call it, now that we're the freshman class of the elderly. So,
Let's not get there yet. Let's hold on. I'm still holding on to mid 50s. I like the sound of that. But as usual with these Punahou 88 interviews, I want to learn all about, even going back to prehistoric times with your family, but we're going to go all the way up to, 1988, and that's kind of where things are going to end.
awesome.
But if Bazemore is your father's name, why don't we just start on that side? Who are the Bazemores and how do they end up in Hawaii?
So that's my dad's side, and he's from originally from the Virginia Beach area. Both my grandfathers were in the army, and the way that my dad ended up in Hawaii was he met my mom in high school, and they were both my grandfathers were stationed at Fort Story, Virginia, and then they fell in love, dated. My dad got drafted when he got out of the army because in all the U.S. Army's wisdom, they drafted him for 2 years, sent him to a radar technician school that lasted 18 months. So there wasn't enough, fortunately, there wasn't enough time there to send him to Vietnam. But he now had a special skill set that was very needed at the time, which was tracking things on radar. And my mom, and again, it's a wild story because I don't even know how she figured this out, but she sent his application into Kokee tracking station on Kauai. And he had the skill set that they needed to help track the launch of the man to the moon at the time. And so my mom sent his resume off, and he actually had the job. But my mom told him, "Oh, you just have an interview. Let's go out there." And she basically tricked him, and they moved out there and fell in love with the islands. And obviously, my mom is Hawaiian from Hawaii, and so and she always wanted to go back home. So they moved to Kauai. He spent about a year and a half there, and then they moved to Oahu. And then, I was born shortly thereafter, and then my dad, and mom obviously stayed all the way through till you know they lived there for the rest of their lives. So
What kind of a name is Bazemore?
um I think it's just white is what my parents, because they came from an age of still a significant amount of um segregation in the South, and there really wasn't that understanding of genealogy at the time, or even I think my grandparents, specifically my grandmother, was raised very poor. And so they were, they just knew black and white in the South. So he would always say that he was, English, Irish, but I have no idea what, exactly. We haven't done the ancestry.com or anything like that. But I think it was just of that genre, the English Irish type. But there are a significant amount of Black people with the name Bazemore as well. So I think it kind of, you could kind of connect those dots that there was probably a lot of, plantation type situations where people took the last names. I didn't actually meet my grandmother until I was 18, just because obviously the travel and everything didn't happen as easily back then. And I think my dad just fell in love so much with Hawaii, he just never wanted to go back. So,
if your dad grew up in a poor family, were there kind of indications or was there any aspect of his personality or his sort of outlook on life that can be traced back to him having grown up, without much?
I think so. My dad ended up being a labor leader in Hawaii, and I think that sort of lended well to his personality because he was kind of this very street smart, kind of gruff and scrappy person, and so I think that really that was the aspect of his personality he that really resonated with his job and how he lived his life. And I think I got a lot of the ability to navigate uncertainty and just, being more street smart from him. And that's, I've used that well in my career and obviously raising my daughters. And so yeah, he was very scrappy and street smart, and didn't take a whole lot of no for an answer. He knew that he just had to, basically be relentless and find another way. And that's, I can see that in my personality and the way I approach life now too. So,
What was your father's name?
Joe Bazemore.
In what ways was he street smart? Like, can you think of any incidents or anecdotes where you kind of saw him exerting his will?
Uh, I think probably, well, being a union leader in the time he was, this is, if our classmates can remember back to the Walter Kupau and Henry Hui Hui days, my dad actually, he was a labor leader of the painters and allied trades, which is specifically the drywall, the glaziers. And at the time in the mid 80s, the carpenters were having a sort of a territory war with the allied trades. If you remember, Google back in that era with how the unions were run and how they, the prevalence of the strikes, and they would picket and, just do some very um, bully-ish type behavior with each other. And Walter Kupau was known for that. These are individuals that, it's well documented that they, if you want to say gang affiliation or just things that, kind of under the cover of darkness happened. That was really the one of the main things I remember growing up, just like knowing my dad was picking a fight with Walter Kupau. I'm like, what are we doing here? So, and it was interesting to watch that kind of unfold on the inside. And again, I think I was probably somewhere between middle school and high school at the time, and just not, kind of being slightly scared. And then after you kind of come out the other side and watch what happened, because he really did dig his heels in. And I wasn't, I don't think I can fully understand exactly what happened, but I know that he preserved the work for his members. And I think that was it was interesting and scary. And then on the other side, it was still cool to see that he was, he was fighting for the little guys. And because obviously the carpenters were the bigger union and the allied trades were smaller, but he continued to fight for the little guy. And the interesting thing is, if on both sides of my family, I have that those acts of service to something greater than oneself. So it's really interesting when you look at it as like holistically, that was kind of an important value on both sides of my parents' family. So.
Let's move to your mother's side. What was her name?
Wendy Heen Bazemore, and I'm sure everyone remembers her from either being a study hall monitor or at the PFA office at school. So she did 35 years at Punahou, and that was, other than being proud of my sister, myself, my daughters, Punahou was the love of her life, really. That was one thing when they moved to Hawaii. And my mom, because her dad was in the military, didn't get to stay in Hawaii for school. So She always knew she wanted her kids to go to Punahou. So it was kind of this passion of her life, and she ended up achieving that. And my sister and I both were 13-year students. So
We'll get to the Punahou years, of course, but what kind of a name is Heen?
Heen is it's a Hawaiian Chinese name, and so my great grandfather or great great grandfather came over from China, and he was one of his name was Chung Muk Heen, which if you are familiar with Chinese, it's his family name was actually Chung. But of course, in the translation in Hawaii, it became Heen, or sometimes you'll hear it represented as Ah Heen. So he came over, and he was actually um, Chiang Kai-shek's one of his advisors. And I think if you remember, that was kind of in the era where Sun Yat-sen came over and went to Iolani. And so he came over, and there were this is going to be funny because now you're going to see this like underbelly of like nefariousness in my family, I guess you could call it. But he was connected to the local Chinese mafia at some point. There was legend of that. And so but he came over. I think he was settling on Maui, and of course he had a Chinese wife in China, and then he had the more favored wife in Hawaii, and was Hawaiian. So that's kind of how that started. But yeah, Heen is a Chinese name, but if they're all of us that I'm aware of are all both Chinese and Hawaiian. So he took a job at building the naval air station runway on Midway Island. So they basically shipped them up there to do the work on the runway up there. And during this time, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So what people don't know is that Hawaii was still a territory at the time. So they had this whole cohort of people, mostly young men, mostly young Hawaiian men, who were up there doing this work. And the US government um, didn't know what to do with them because these are not US citizens. So my grandfather was taken as a prisoner of war of the US government at the time because they did not know what to do with him because he's not a US citizen. They were not sure what affiliations the Hawaiians, I guess, at the time had. So he was taken as a prisoner of war during that time. And at that time, his father, so my great grandfather, was the clerk of Honolulu. So that is the equivalent of what the mayor is today. So my great grandfather had to negotiate the release of my grandfather from the US government. And so my grandfather was eventually released. I don't know exactly how long he was kept there. I think it was a few weeks while they figured out that. So my great grandfather negotiated the release of my grandfather. My grandfather ended up coming back to Hawaii and joining the US Army. So I don't know I mean, I'm sure there was instances when people were in the internment camps and then came out and ended up joining the military. But my grandfather was a prisoner of war turned military. He was one of the first Native Hawaiian sergeant majors in the U.S. Army. He ended up serving in Korean War and Vietnam twice. And when he had retired in the late 70s, early 80s, when we went into the conflict in the Gulf the first time, my grandfather was convinced they were calling him to come back, even though he'd been retired for, 15 or 20 years at that point. So
Well, that certainly shows dedication to join the military of the country that unjustly imprisoned you. All right. Well, talk about your mother. Where was she born? What was her childhood like?
so my grandfather's family was the Heen family is, if a lot of people will recognize the last name, my uncle is a retired federal judge. He's actually still alive at 98. It's amazing. He ran the Democratic Party in Hawaii for years. And so my mom comes from this very politically active family, and my grandfather was one of nine. So my mom is the oldest of 54 grandchildren. And they ended up moving into our Diamond Head family home, which is still occupied by my cousin and my uncle. And again, just a very large Hawaiian family. And my actually my grandfather's mother had her ninth child 4 months before my mother was born. So they were raised basically as siblings, but he was the uncle and she was the niece. My grandmother and her mother-in-law were both, nursing at the same time, and just had this really great ohana relationship. And then my mom would and then obviously there were many more babies born afterwards, and my mom was really the caretaker of a lot of them growing up. And she'd tell a story about the older or all the aunts and uncles going to Wahiawa to go fish. And I guess that was their version of partying back then. They'd go out for the weekend, they'd fish, they'd drink, they'd hang out, and then they'd come back. And I'm sure this, Child Protective Services did not exist in this time, because I think she was probably between 6 and 7, left alone for the weekend with the babies. So, or at least that's what they told us at the time. So this is all, you know, historical lore, but I think it does speak to the time of, just not, being simpler times and more trusting. And I think she had to grow up fast, because it was a very, it was a big family, and they were, they had more means than my father's family did, but they were still a very, you know, dedicated to a life of service, public service through political office, and then also just, in general, serving each other. So,
What sort of cultural aspects were part of your mother's life or part of her personality that were Hawaiian that you can point back to that culture and that legacy?
definitely her generosity of just her gift of aloha, and being able to be like just this gracious and very giving person. And then obviously the priority of family and community. And so that was, just infused in her personality. The interesting thing is she never, because she kind of was in Hawaii until she was around 13 or 14. And then she spent the rest of her years between Camp Zama in Japan and then Fort Story in Virginia. She really never learned how to dance hula, or the language was a challenge for her. And so that was another thing she made sure my sister and I had, was an access to our culture. So hula lessons, and learning more about um, the cultural aspects of our family that way. And then also, obviously the cooking part of it. And that's really the part that I continue, I was very blessed. I got to take care of my grandfather until he died for a significant part after my grandmother passed. So probably about a good 20 years. And so he loved to eat, and I loved to cook for him. So I think that kind of came through too, is that love of just caring for people.
Let's talk about how your parents met.
Well, my mom was, obviously Virginia Beach, 1959. I think she ended up there. A very beautiful Hawaiian woman, obviously exotic to that time. And I think she was very popular at the high school. My dad would love to think that he looked like Elvis at the time. I've seen pictures, maybe, I don't know. But my dad was very, he was kind of that bad boy, charismatic. And I think my mom was a year older. So I think it was her senior year, his junior year, that they started dating, and then dated and then broke up over the summers, or however they do it in high school, and then eventually ended up together. And they were together until my father, for over 50 years. So until I think my father passed in 2012. So
Amazing. They're high school sweethearts who stayed together their whole life.
Yeah. And that was, not without ups and downs. Obviously, I mean, you and I have both been married a long time. And so it was, never perfect, but
Let's fast forward to an important moment, which is the birth of Paige, Paige Bazemore. Where were you born? And tell us about what you remember most about your childhood, kind of growing up in Hawaii.
so I was born on Oahu at Kapiolani Women's and Children's, like I'm sure probably 80% of us in the class were if you were born on Oahu. And so I was born there. I grew up in Kaimuki. Again, it was a very small house. And my dad was hanging drywall at the time, so he wasn't actually in the union. Um, he, there's actually a picture of him in the Star Bulletin hanging the that very unique pitched roof ceiling in Kahala Mall above the fountain. Um,
Okay.
so he helped build Kahala Mall. Kaimuki was very unique because it's kind of set up as the numbered streets and sort of grid-like. So I just remember being able to, you know, ride my bike or be around, and everything was that, I grew up on Mauna Loa between 17th and 18th Avenue, and just it's probably very similar to being in New York now. It's like you just kind of get all the geography points based on that grid and that number system. So I remember just being hot sometimes because I know my uncle would call it God's country because it's, Kaimuki, it's very temperate, but it leans more hot, obviously from the name Ka'imuki, the oven of tea leaves. So
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
another thing I remember is just there was quite a few of our classmates that lived in the general area, like Jana He and Uilani Chun, and so we kind of had that that connection to it, carpooling and things like that. Jana He also went to Waiokea with us, so I've known her for ever as well. So that was all, and then Kamuki just seems to still be this little niche connection that we have still to this day. So,
When you think about your childhood and growing up in the 70s in Kaimuki and Hawaii, what do you see? Like, what are you doing? What were you doing with your friends? And what was unique? What made it kind of 70s about it?
I think the down or the main business district of Kaimuki at the time was that thrifty drug Cress, and then there was a little burger joint on the corner called Poochie's. And so I just remember my mom was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and being able to drive us there during summers, and we go to Kaimuki Library for the whatever free programming they had for the keiki at the time, and then being able to go over to Thrifty Drugs or to Crest and get our lunch or our treat, which was usually like an icy and some like candy coated colored popcorn or something of the time. And then also they had a record section, and they used to put out these compilations of these albums of Hawaiian and local songs. And I remember those albums getting released to Crest, and being able to go in and see as a little girl like what local songs or artists and how exciting that was, to just be of that era.
In the 70s, there was the Hawaiian Renaissance, and there was just a burst of of music from local artists. And so sounds like you were kind of right there.
My family also has some musical ties. My cousin is Liko Martin, which is the writer of the song Waimanalo Blues, and
Oh,
and he was
wait,
also
was he in Country Comfort?
he was not in the band, but he wrote a lot of their songs.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great song.
And he was part of the group that would go and access Kaho'olawe illegally at the time.
Mm.
So so again, it's kind of this other political active arm of the family that he was uh, part of that renaissance and that birth of, sort of bringing our culture back to the forefront through song, through language, and then and through values, because that was really important. That he wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Kaho'olawe is, it is our land, and it shouldn't be desecrated through bombing and all of that. So another interesting aspect was just growing up and watching, KITV or KGMB and seeing, oh, Liko got arrested again. So,
Like, yay.
yeah, but at the time, it really wasn't. It was kind of, especially for a family that was very politically active and not understanding really what that seed of revolution and renaissance was going to bear, which is what we have today. But at the time, it caused lots of consternation in the older generation, and it also caused a little bit of shame for them. And even my uncle Walter, who has had a very storied career from the legal bench. He served on OHA, he was an OHA elected official, and then he did some work on the TMT project in Haleakala, and just hearing where they came from in their thought process, in how they were basically taught to assimilate, and then as we evolved and we got bolder and more connected to our culture and more connected to the language, and how we've kind of moved to the other side. And it was still hard for my uncle to understand that what Liko did by getting arrested really set the table for the Renaissance to actually have a chance to bloom. So Walter Ritty and my cousin and all the other heroes that really put themselves out there and got arrested and shamed really for what they did. They were the architects of this current Renaissance of Hawaii. So.
Given the size of your family and that it was so many Hawaiians, what were your family get-togethers like? What do you remember? If what you said, there are 54 grandchildren.
Yeah,
So,
there, or at least that we know of. So,
what were these get-togethers like?
they were lots of food, obviously, Kanikapila. We had a lot of amazing musicians in the family. Very Liko, his mom, my auntie Marion, would get up and sing. They would bribe me with $1 to dance hula during them, and so I just remember a lot of bringing up hay from the ocean that a cousin caught, and then we were eating it that night. And then my other aunt was Japanese, so we would have a lot of sashimi. So it was really just this amazing melting pot of food and song and dance and stories. And so that was that was like probably one of my favorite parts of growing up, was getting together with all the cousins and just sharing that time together.
Okay, let's get to Punahou. When did you enter Punahou?
Kindergarten, so 1975.
And you already said that your mother was very really wanted you to go to Punahou, so you got in. Great.
So yeah, and I don't know if she actually told my dad that she tested me for Kamehameha, but she did not. But my dad really wanted me to go to Kamehameha because it was cheaper, and and my mom was dead set on Punahou. So that was like even not up for debate. So unfortunately, my dad being the Haole and not really having a handle on what was going on, my mom won again. So.
Well, give us just a couple or even one memory of, I guess, the Winnie unit years. What do you remember? What are some of your cherished memories from that time?
Um, well, one of my cherished memories, I'm going to throw it back to Wilcox, and it was Kathy Werdeman and I, and she says there was another little boy around there, but I don't know. But I remember Kathy reminded me years ago, and then I remembered that she and I got in trouble because we were probably talking about too much to each other. And what we were talking about and what we were so excited about was we were catching up on each other's watching of, I think it was The Young and the Restless or General Hospital, because that was what our mothers watched. And so she and I were sharing our, recollections of the latest episode or something. So if you could just imagine these little 5-year-old girls catching up on their stories, that was definitely one of the, the cuter memories that, I've been able to share with Kathy over the years. And then beyond that, I think some of my favorite times was just May Day and being able to get out of class but more importantly, dance hula, which was a huge part of my life and one of my, my great loves and passions. And so, and then just the celebration and being able to live your culture through that. So that was, I think, Winnie Unit's May Day was probably one of my favorite times.
When you entered the academy, like you were 14, right? How are you feeling about yourself? Where did you feel like you fit in?
I always thought it was interesting that the person I am now obviously was shaped by the person I was in academy, but I just feel like I'm so different. So I think when I think of high school, I just think of awkward, kind of fumbling, figuring it out, not really, I wasn't a high achieving academic at the time. I think and I would not regard myself as that ever, but I think I was just trying to figure it out. And had friend groups, but they were, I had a lot of different friend groups. I didn't, I wasn't one that stuck with the same friends all the way through. But I think I kind of figured it out, I know some of our classmates just knew they had this, they knew who they were, where they were going, and I still think I'm a work in progress. So I think I would classify myself as awkward and wandering. I think.
What was your understanding of sort of the ethnic demarcations in high school, and where do you think you fit in? And was that a factor at all? Did you notice sort of the groupings that would sometimes take place?
Yeah, I mean, my I had my like group of, I'll call Hawaiian friends that I hung out with. So Ulalia, Auli'i, Laura Hind. And so we kind of have the same background in hula and everything. So I had that group. And then I had, I guess I kind of represented the poi dog, I guess we can call it. And then I had kind of towards the end of my high school career, I had more of the uh, Kailua Haole friends that I hung out with. So I think, and that was kind of me bouncing around a little bit and figuring out my identity. And because I had the mixed background, I think that was really kind of where I went. And then, but I was also good friends with Kelly Yanagawa and Kimi Sakuda and Kristen Sakamaki. So I had like this. I just I don't think I fit in one category, and I think I'd like to go between a lot of them just to they all offered different different experiences and had different types of fun. So that was and that kind of, I think that helped me in um, my later life when I moved so often because of Jeff's career and being in the military. So I think that kind of helped me. I could figure it out and fit in wherever. So I think I can be thankful to Punahou for that.
Was there drinking in your repertoire of activities?
Um, a little bit, not not. I don't think it was a huge.
Was that with the Kailua Howleys?
Yes, more so. So, but and because there was an element of our Redeemer and public school people, so I think they kind of that was more introduced. I think it was primarily a group of girls that went to Punahou and then guys that were at either our Redeemer or other like Kalaheo or Kailua. So I think yes. So that was definitely a little, but again, not. I think I was always because I still lived in Kaimuki, even though we were in and they were in Kailua, so it was either spending the night and at the heart of it, I think we were still concerned and wanted to be law-abiding citizens. So there was an element of fear there. So
You say that you were not necessarily a top achiever as an academic, although our audience should know that you are a high achiever as an entrepreneur and in all things business, sports. Were there any classes or teachers that sort of inspired you or that you remember as being sort of particularly influential on you?
Mr. Staub uh, was really influential on my writing voice specifically. And then obviously you can't say English department without Norm Hinley. And that European studies class in my senior year was extremely impactful in developing my appreciation for uh, the intersection of art, history, and writing. And that was, and then Mr. Gould, social studies, he was just such a positive quality person that you could talk to and be very real with whatever struggles you were going through. And I think the best part of Punahou for me, and the part that I never had a problem with, was the English and creative writing.
Given how important hula was to you, what was your greatest moment, or what is your most cherished memory of the Holoku pageant and your participation in it?
It was probably my senior year, and it was this, I think it was Mahina Hoku was the song, and it was uh called, like, I don't even remember what, Girls Special or something, and you had to be the one of the top dancers to get selected for that. And we wore these 1920 inspired outfits that was the cellophane hula skirt and the shiny bra top. And that was
I,
to
I, I
me
think I remember that.
that was like the pinnacle of like glamour and just everything. And so and I distinctly remember Kelly Markey being there with me. And because we were both tall, I think we were probably the center of the hula line. So I remember that very distinctly. And that was probably my favorite moment, the going out year of that. So
Um, at graduation, what was your mindset about the future? How did you feel? What was your frame of mind?
So my parents had basically bribed me to stay at University of Hawaii because they knew that I wasn't really academically focused. And so they said, if you go to UH, we'll get you a car. And so they got me a car on my 17th birthday of our senior year. So that's December. And so I had a car, and I remember just thinking I was going to go to UH and stay there for 2 years, and then end up going somewhere on the mainland for college. And so I was, I remember just being hopeful, but and thinking I had everything planned out. I was going to do 2 years, go somewhere on the mainland, go to law school, because I was really inspired by my uncle who was the judge. And then so I just remember being very hopeful um, and slightly jealous, because a lot, obviously probably 80% of our classmates left, and I was slightly jealous. But funny thing was, the following year a lot of them were back home with me. Um, so it wasn't that bad. And then I ended up not leaving. So that was, or I didn't leave until I married my husband. So
Final question. You live on the mainland now.
mhm.
When you tell people that you are from Hawaii, that you grew up there, and like they say to everyone, what was that like? What do you say?
um, I say it was the best. I mean, the weather, obviously, but I think the best part about it was it gave me such a respect and understanding for other cultures, and really not not seeing, everyone, it's kind of trite and people probably don't believe it that you don't see race or anything. But when we grew up in Hawaii, it was kind of this, understanding that everyone was different and everyone was unique and had different backgrounds. And even though there was, I'm not going to be so naive to say there wasn't any racism, because there was, but it wasn't. I think that there was a level of commitment to understanding, and because we wanted, because it's such a small island, and it's such a unique space, that you really wanted to be able to learn about each other. So I think it was very unique. So I always tell people that it was the best, because it helped me understand um, the differences in people, and how to embrace that, and to help other people, just to learn, and that curiosity often leads to um, friendships or business opportunities, and just, the ability to be open and curious. And when I met my husband, who was educated in Michigan, he didn't learn about, all the different Asian religions or anything. And when I went through, like, just thinking back of all the field trips we did and all the different, cultures that we explored and had the fortunate opportunity to learn about, I think that gave me an immense advantage